welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
Oh, Tim, usually I say I'm fantastic, but there is a word that is out there that is beyond fantastic that I cannot think of right now, but that is how I feel because the guest that we have on today brought so much positive energy and was sort of this Moby Dick of a guest that we've been talking about for years since we've seen him in Pan Man. But Tim, the Moby Dick of my conversation right now is your mood. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. And I'm especially great to introduce this conversation with old friend Kato Kaelin. And he really is an old friend. I worked with him on a movie. It has to be 12, 13, 14 years ago now. And the movie is called Pan Man. And we talk about it a little bit in the conversation with Kato. It is how we know each other, so of course it's going to come up. You can check out Pan Man on Tubi, but this conversation mostly, Lance, is about Kato, his life as a celebrity because of a tragic crime. And he is also doing his own podcast now. It's a true crime podcast called One Degree of Scandalous, and it is fantastic. And I've been listening because I'm friendly with him on social media. I see his posts, and I've seen him covering OJ's case, and I had to listen. And when I say this is the deepest and most interesting stuff that I've seen on OJ's case, I mean it. There are stories that you haven't heard elsewhere, and they can dive deep because it's a podcast. There's no TV time limit or anything like that. So make sure to check out One Degree of Scandalous if you are interested in the story of OJ Simpson and the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, and really just the whole story, because it is basically a soap opera.
And how often do we get to say that you can listen to this information that has never been put out there on arguably the most publicized crime that we've ever seen in our lifetime? It reintroduced reality television to the American public and the world. Like it blew up in such a way where it changed the landscape of broadcast criminal news. And Kato was in the middle of it. He was a cultural icon back in the early 90s, early to mid 90s. Everyone remembers him on the witness stand imitating the knocks that he heard from the guest house the night of the murders. We remember his facial expressions when he was asked certain questions. And two parts here. We totally recognize how special of an opportunity it is to speak with him about that today on this show. But also, everyone out there who hasn't listened to his podcast, like you said, we should all recognize how special it is to hear all of the things that happened that we didn't hear back in the day when we thought we heard everything, when there was so much news, but there was still more. It's really, really fascinating and riveting. And I just want to bring it back to the point that I brought up earlier. He delivers all of this with this incredible sense of positivity and kindness and just empathy. And he just doesn't have like a bad bone in his body. But you wouldn't recognize that after seeing his performance in Pan Man.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. He is very friendly and so positive. And just a nice guy and very funny as well. So make sure to follow him on all his social media. There are links in the show notes, and you can find the show on YouTube. It's at TZ Scandal, and the TZ is for Tom Zenner. That is his co-host. And all this stuff has really good video as well as really awesome conversation. So hope you enjoy this conversation with Kato, and I really hope you check out his show, One Degree of Scandalous.
All right, we've got to break real quick for a commercial, and we'll be right back with, and I'm so pumped to say it, Kato Kaelin.
welcome to the podcast, Kato Kaelin. How are you today?
Hey, Tim, how you doing? I'm doing great. I'm in Los Angeles. You guys are East Coast, baby. You get paid 3 hours earlier than me, so it's always good. Hey, Lance, how you doing?
Oh my God, I'm doing amazing. This is like one of the most surreal moments of my life. This is Kato Kaelin. This is someone who is a staple of my existence for months back in the day.
Months? It was years back. You're talking about the trial. It was on for, if you think about it, it was a year and a half, and then the civil trial went for another year. So it was like 2.5 years of court. So yeah, and Larry King, who I became dear friends with, this is in the 90s. People forget that 94 through, I guess it's been 30 years, so it's still going on. But Larry King, the late Larry King, said, "Kato, you're the first reality star. You're the guy that started it." I said, well,
Exactly.
I guess in hindsight, I guess so, Larry.
But I remember our history class in,
Wow.
I think it was 9th grade.
Wow.
And we had the trial on in our history class because the teacher knew that there was something significant that was going on in culture, in media, and watching someone like yourself go through that process was so weirdly relatable because you were such a relatable person in the whole scope of that trial. You were the most relatable person.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because a professor at the university in South Carolina, I don't know the exact university, I talked to their law students via the Zoom, and it went great because she was the professor there, and it was just great talking to students who they watched the trial in hindsight of the tapes of it because lots of landmark decisions, and the trial itself was, as we know, was televised, so it was just sort of a precedent of all the things that could happen because of being televised, and decisions, and prosecution, and TV series, and Oscars that were won for documentaries. But yeah, I said to myself back, I always said that never has a man done so little, me, to be recognized by so many. So I made that my byline. I was the first Kardashian, famous for doing nothing.
No, dude, you totally didn't. I appreciate the humor in that, but
Yeah.
but you did do something. It was a change. There was a shift in media, and you were part of that shift, and it's ultimately a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It was there was a change, and I think everything kind of, because of that, everybody looks of mistakes that were made, and everything could be better in life. So 30 years ago, it still blows me away how fast. And I tell people, it is a blink of an eye. It is with time. It's just amazing. I always say time flies when you're throwing clocks, and it is like that. So
Shocking that so much time has gone by. But you and your co-host Tom Zenner on your new podcast, One Degree of Scandalous, you have been covering the case in depth. Really over the summer, especially around the 30-year anniversary. But it's really impressive work. But before we get too deep into that, I'm just curious what went into the decision to start a podcast?
Well, I've been approached to do so many podcasts, to get a podcast going, and quite a few years ago, I met Tom, and Tom was a sportscaster in Boston during the days of Brady, and then he started his career in Chicago during the Michael Jordan years, and I love sports. So when we had our first dinner, I thought this is great, and then he was a news anchor. Then he did sports in Phoenix, and it's a great person to work off of, Tom, of sort of setting it in pace, and then me being the question, sort of like he's play-by-play and I'm color. And I kind of adapted that in sports, and it just clicked on the first time we did our first podcast. And I think we're on over 100 now, and it just gets bigger and bigger and better on One Degree of Scandalous. And people you were mentioning earlier before we were on the air about you watched, I think, it on Spotify or on Apple, but I do it on YouTube, watching it so people can get I think it adds to have, like I'm doing your show, it adds to see and to hear. Although in the car, it's great to have a podcast to have the time go by on a road trip.
So can you maybe get a little bit of background on yourself. I know there's probably like no one out there who's like, who is this guy? But is there a like an intro so we can catch some people up on yourself? And feel free to say that the highlight of your whole career has been your appearance in Pan Man. Feel free to add that.
Pan Man rules. That's Tim's film. I don't know, Lance, were you involved in Pan Man?
Well, it's an interesting story because Tim had the idea for Pan Man. He had an iteration of it when he lived in Massachusetts, and then we shot this sort of teaser based on like a scene outside of the public access TV station that we were a part of, and then that scene kind of it became a new scene in the movie that you were in. But that was as far as I was. He moved to LA after that, and made the actual Pan Man.
Well, anyway, I'm a huge horror fan and all that, and I'm sure Tim is because he made Pan Man. But you got the movies like Smile, and then they do Smile 2, so they're successful. Terrifier 1, Terrifier up to 3. So I love the genre of horror. But that kind of leads me into my background. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was raised there with 6 siblings. So, and no, it wasn't a 4-bedroom guest house. I know you're trying to say that, Tim. Anyways, and my whole goal was I went to University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. I had a TV show called Kato and Friends. And I had a radio show, and I kept going, this is I got to get out of Wisconsin, which I love, by the way, and I love all the Wisconsin sport teams. I said, I'm going to California, came to California, and the first audition I ever had, first one when I got an agent, was a Coca-Cola commercial, and I landed. I said, this is easy. So it's sort of I got my Screen Actors Guild card for, God, I think I'm on 40 years. I'm an old guy, but I try to stay healthy. And I kept saying, I want to get more into, all the acting and hosting. And that's where my career started. So I became friends with a gentleman named Grant Kramer at the time. I'm kind of doing the cliff notes of this, of leading into the trial of how it happened. Grant and I, he was on General Hospital, and he had a very, very successful. He had an acting coach. So we started a business of casting. We started casting all these films that were not the A-list, but sort of the direct-to-video, sort of with Harry Hamlin. We did at the time. By the way, they're very popular in the 90s with L.A. Law, and there was, what is this, Lorenzo Lamas. So these are big stars in the 90s, and we had a huge thing with the casting business, and I was a wrangler on set, and I started meeting everybody while going on auditions. Cut to the 90s, 94, a week before the murders happened, I was screen tested. I brought in, then they tested me, and then it was a film called Dumb and Dumber. And I thought, boy, my career is going to I think it's getting closer and closer. And by the way, I did a little small parts and stuff. And the murders happened, and then the trial, the preliminaries happened. I was too hot to touch, and my whole life, it didn't stop, but I was a caricature, and people saw me as a soap. I was a real person, but they saw me as a soap character when it was really a real life. But that didn't deter me at all. I still, to this day, it's 2024, 25, and still on auditions, still doing everything in regards to the world of acting, and up for many things now as a producer. And I never mention it, but I did shoot a show called Wrong Place, Wrong Time, bought by Jupiter Entertainment, which Jupiter Entertainment is the number one any TV show you watch in true crime, it's probably made by Jupiter. And we did a little pilot presentation teaser, and it honestly is phenomenal. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the host, but it's that good. And we'll see what happens. It's a very tough business out here, as Tim will tell you. And as you probably know, Lance, that people change their jobs every 3 months. So lots of activity going on in the world out here, but that's my intro to Kato.
So I'm super interested in this show that was bought by Jupiter. How much can you tell us about this? Is it sort of under wraps right now, or?
After this, I could, I'll send you just the trailer reel. You can't broadcast it, but I can show you that. It's basically people like myself that are the third wheel in a crime, that by no fault of their own, they're thrust into something, their whole life changes. It's like I was the last person seen with this person who's gone now, and their life is like they have nothing to do with something, but there's many people that have been through situations that they're the third wheel and it revolves around them, and they're innocent, but their activity in it can probably convict the person that's behind the crime, and it's fascinating.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's a really great idea for a show.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with it. I like I said, other things kind of going on. You've got to always stay busy, but to be involved with this Jupiter has been great. They're great people, super smart. They got offices in New York and in Knoxville where they have a huge studio. But John Walsh is part of their detective. Singya, I forget his name. A show, Snapped on Oxygen's been out for 25 years. A whole list of stuff that's going on. Just you can check them out. But other stuff going on too, and that's it.
Man, that is a great idea for a show. I'm glad you were able to tell us a little bit about it.
Oh yeah, crime does pay.
Yeah. I mean, Tim and I have talked to a number of people who are former criminals and people who are, secondary victims or secondary survivors.
Right.
And we have experienced that third wheel, vicariously. We've heard people talk about that, and to actually put a spotlight on it is really, really cool. And I can't wait to check that out.
Right. And people's lives change when it gets handled by media and stories come out, and then you really can't go out. It's because people think, oh, they got something to do with this or whatever. But it's life-changing for anybody that's a third wheel.
Yeah, and it was absolutely life-changing for you. Can you take us through that a little bit? Like what the experience of really going from an actor to you're thrust into this reality.
I'll tell you, Tim, it's sort of people always say be careful what you wish for. I think when I grew up in Wisconsin, I kept going, I want to be famous. Well, I got famous before proving, although I did little things, but it went backwards for me, went completely backwards for me of becoming famous for a horrible situation, which I've never lost sight of, a horrible situation. And I always tell people, I hate the dark. I like the light. And I like positive things. So I always try to look at the positive side. But back in the 90s, when this was televised and that, it was the hardest part, I think, was no matter what, if the media, the TMZs, the hard copy shows at the time, they can bring you up to the top. Like, oh my God, everybody wants me to show up at a party, and then they want to watch you drop. It's sort of like they plan it. They plan it to watch the downfall of a person, very Shakespearean. But I knew that I've got a very large family and a huge base of great friends from California to Milwaukee, and they always keep you humble when they always make you. They're always going to be your friend. They don't. They'll never turn on you, basically. But the court of public opinion turned on me, and before I could defend myself in that, the court of public opinion made their decision. So that was the tough part of people, if they like me or not. So I guess it's sort of my late parents just say, just believe in yourself. You have no problems. You always got family. So I really do credit my mom and dad and my family for always, you got to understand, during this time, it was on every day. And I had people coming up to me like, do you need to see a psychologist? You must be going through tough times. My psychologist was my family. So I'm very thankful to be raised the way I was. And I know a lot of people aren't privy to have that kind of upbringing. And I was. So I didn't really have any, psychological problems and all that. I always had just a phone. We didn't text back then. We actually talked. So that was much better.
Wow.
That is much better. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's great to hear that you had such a wonderful support system, because I can imagine that it would, make people feel like a different person after an experience like that.
Yeah. So, you grow, and I met lots of relationships I've had of that, I kind of don't, people always ask, about the past and all. There's nothing you can do about the past. Everything's about now and the future. And I always try to make that better for everybody, myself, to pay it forward, because nothing you can do about the past. Everything's about now. But I became friends with Detective Lang and Jill Shively, who's on our episode, Ellen Park, the limo driver. And it's amazing stories. Kim Goldman. They're all great stories, and everybody has their life, and everybody had that situation of being in that situation of the courtroom and to testify. So it's incredible.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program. Yeah, and to be put on the spot like that, you just mentioned a few names there. What is your interaction with the family members like the Goldmans now, and how do you guys commiserate?
Yeah, well, like I said, that's 30 years. And I don't know how Fred, I think, according to Kim, I think he's doing okay. I think he lives in Arizona. Kim kind of moved on. I did her podcast. Everybody wants to get over it, and they have. And, they told their stories of the past, but like myself, everybody has moved on. So I think that's a good thing that we hit like on my One Degree of Scandalous, we sort of hit everything and got it out of the way in 30 years. And then I went on to other scandals or anything. And I'm very relatable because every time that I do a show, it seems like the people think they know me or they feel like they know me, which adds to it and they're very open about talking about anything. And it really adds to our show, from a woman who wrote the book on John Benet Ramsey to the John Wilson, who was part of the Varsity Blues, to the private detective for the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial. So you have to understand, every day if you put on any kind of news, there's a trial, there's something going on with a scandal or anything. So it's sort of unending.
Yeah, and so you mentioned some of the guests that you've been speaking to recently. Jill Shively, Alan Park, and Zoe Tur and Detective Tom Lang. You had all of them on one episode, I believe, as well.
And Jim Moray from Inside Edition. And we sort of had a round table.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. It really was fascinating for me because it was live. I didn't know what was, what the questions or whatever would pop up. I think it's cathartic, and also when you hear other people's story that they also went through certain things. And that's why I loved it so much. And people can go, the great thing about podcasts, you can go back and see the whole library and go and watch these. And I love it. As a matter of fact, Zoe Tur, you mentioned, was the helicopter pilot watching the chase, who's first to the chase. I saw just today on my Instagram page, which is at Kato_Kaelin, and for Twitter, make sure everybody follows that at Kato_Kaelin, Kaelin. But Zoe's involved now with some new series at Jupiter called Serial Killers of L.A. And I just right before the show, I saw it popped up. So, and you mentioned that. So, that's LA. It's basically crime-ridden, and a lot more crime going on lately. I was at one of these CVS's and I couldn't believe I saw people just shoplifting, and I went to chase, and the manager said, "Don't." I'm blown away of what's going on. And this was like in a nice neighborhood. So, anyways, that's crime.
Yeah, well, there's certainly no shortage of it in LA. And so you mentioned Zoe Tur, a news helicopter pilot who was the first pilot to have spotted OJ before the chase. Is that correct?
On a hunch, thought maybe OJ's at the grave of Nicole, and while flying the helicopter, he said, "Is that a white Bronco?" And then it started from that, and then after, I guess, other people caught on, and then it was out of airspace. You got to watch the episode. I think airspace, the police said, get out of airspace with the helicopter. I mean, the stories, there's a lot more to it there. It's being the first. And of course, the Bronco chase. Once again, what Lance had said, there's so many moments. And that was like one of the moments that people that's one of those, where were you moments? Where were you during the chase? Where were you during the verdict? All these different moments of where were you?
Absolutely. And I heard you on one of your episodes recently saying that you were with your friends watching the basketball game, the finals, Rockets versus the Knicks, as I was as well when that broke in. But I really got to urge our listeners to check these episodes out because there are so many stories in there that I had never heard. And we mentioned Jill Shively. What a story she has.
Yeah, I'll just whet the appetite of the people, but I think her story is one of the most incredible that she saw that night of the murders. She's driving her car when the Bronco goes through a red light, almost hits her. She has no idea who it is, but she went and committed to memory that license plate number and saw that it was. She thought, I think, on the episode, she thinks it's Marcus Allen or something, but she finds out that it was OJ, because she sold a story, and she gave the money away. By the way, she tells us during the episode, she wasn't a witness, but she saw the Bronco, and it was never used. There's a lot of these things that you go like, "Are you kidding me?" And her story is incredible. And by the way, Tom Lang had said, he was the first to interview her back then and said she's credible, very credible.
Right. And and that whole instance where she wasn't allowed to be a witness was fascinating to hear. I had no idea that could have been such a conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I can't imagine her testimony not having changed the case in some way.
You would think so too. And then you got an expert like a Barry Scheck, who's just genius. And I watch a lot of true crime. He's in so many shows because he is the expert with DNA. It was new, so the prosecution wasn't as tight as Barry Scheck, who was he knew how to speak to the jury. And then I think that was a big part of it too. Him being a lawyer involved in it was just incredibly smart. Here you had this, the person that knows so much about DNA and how to explain it to a layman or someone in the jury. So I think that was very important too. I think people got to be able to convince someone that I think it was 30 billion, that it was probably OJ Simpson, or it was matched completely. It's like kind of mind boggling. So many, like I said, if people that watch it, they'll see all these things that are in the trial, these moments.
Well, that's a moment that we talk about often on our shows because the DNA evidence didn't work in that case. And nowadays it works in, pretty much every case.
Exactly. And no one knew who DNA was. I mean, back when I heard what it was, I thought it just meant for me, dude needs apartment. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Tim. We'll go on to something else.
I'm muted, so you didn't hear the laughter right away, but yeah.
No, I just please edit it in there. No. But no, that just shows you I've always been about the light. And even Tim, like I said, Pan Man was so many years ago. And what was your reaction because you didn't know me, or you knew me from thinking you knew me, and to hire me for your film, and then shooting in Malibu to do this. But I don't know, if I always feel like you have to, if someone has a preconceived notion of what a person is, because I learned, and I never did before because like I said, I have a large family. I'm never judging anybody. I just let them, and I think everybody out in LA judges people no matter what, like, I don't like the guy. And even if you don't know someone, or I don't like her, I heard this person's a real asshole or something. But was it something you had to explain to people? Good or bad? Good or bad? I mean, hopefully it's good. But
well, yeah, I guess I'll just go back a little bit because so we in this very low budget indie movie that we were very excited about making, we threw a wrap party before we finished filming the movie. And we had one scene left to film, and we were wondering who to get for this cameo role. And we were talking about Lloyd Kaufman from Troma. He's got this horror name, or like Robert Englund or someone like that.
Yeah.
And at the wrap party was LJ Jennings, who was a stand-up comedian that I believe you had done some stand-up with around that time. And he mentioned, he's like, I just did stand-up with Kato Kaelin. And it was like, wow, that's actually perfect because it really, you sort of encapsulate this cameo thing without going towards horror as because really the movie is a comedy anyway. It's like an imitation of a horror movie.
Yeah.
It was really perfect.
And I guess your goal basically is, because it was low budget, is to have someone look at it and it to become someone to say, let's put money into this thing and do another one or whatever. I mean,
right.
That's a dream I think everybody has. So
yes.
Let me chime in on that, because I've seen Pan Man a number of times, and the first time I saw it, Tim had told me that you were in it, but I don't believe that he told me like when and where you show up.
Right.
And the first time I saw it, and when you make your appearance at the end, you give this look. You're in the car and you turn to the camera, and I go, oh shit. Like, I never seen, like, you went from being what I remembered from the trial to, oh my, like that, this guy could play like a villain, like a serious villain. Like, you gave a look that, like, even though it's Pan Man, a comedy, that was a serious moment.
Lance, it's acting. Lance, it's acting.
You were very. You must have been very method on set. I bet they were like, he just can't get out of character.
Oh yeah, well, I went to an academy. Anyways, I went to academy for acting way before anything at trial. Like I said, I've been around a long time, and I was getting readings, but it stopped. And whatever, I think everybody's got kind of a blueprint from above of what your life is. It's already planned. You already, there's a death day and everything. It's already planned out. It's what you're given that life. Take advantage. Have fun. Just have fun with it.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program. Well, I'm going to have fun with this next question because I had a question that's written down. And by the way, on my notebook here, when I wrote your name, I was just giggling because I'm like, this is going to be amazing. But I had a serious question here, but I'm going to deviate from that. What villain historically would you want to play if somebody offered you a role and it's a real life historic villain? Who would be your, you could just sink your teeth into?
Well, I think like you guys also, I think anytime we watch a film that has to, it's the villain that makes the film. If it plays off the protagonist and antagonist, it's sort of like, it just like if Javier Bardem was not in No Country for Old Men, it's not No Country for Old Men. It's the villain that makes it a real life villain. Boy, that's one of those I got to think about because
think about it for a little bit.
I got to think about who is in the news or even past. That's a villain that it's sort of like Sam Bankman-Fried, with money being a villain of that's sort of watching the Netflix with Bernie Madoff. Those are villains that didn't kill, but they actually did kill because of how they ruined different lives. But a villain, I'm trying to think of it. There's a big sports villain besides OJ, who is a villain. Give me time on that. And, obviously you thought about this question. Who do you have in mind?
I thought about it in real time. So I didn't, I do understand that there will be a little bit of a thought process going on. So take your time with that. Yeah. I will take my time with my answer on who I think you would make for a good historic or modern day villain. But I'm just going back to that one look from Pan Man. I was like, that could pull off villain.
I think it's with villains. It's funny because this is bizarre in my life. I met people like Robert Blake and Phil Spector in my life. I met these people. I mean, I've got Phil Spector stories that would blow you away, and I'm so glad I was not a witness in that because, I really knew this guy, and I got a whole story when I write my book. That's a chapter. But playing someone like, Robert Blake, people, I don't think they realize he was in a film that Truman Capote did in Cold Blood, and that's such a compelling movie. He'd be a good person to play as a villain, Robert Blake, and being in Beretta.
That's your answer right there.
And by the way, some people maybe don't think it's a villain or not. Everybody's got their own decision. So, getting back to picking out a villain, that's sort of in that vein. And Netflix, by the way, does these documentaries and they keep coming up with stuff. I just did a documentary. I think it's released in a week or two. They do the complete, this incredible OJ 30-year deal that's coming up. And I think everybody's got their own definition of what a villain is. Some people think the villain is really the hero.
Yeah, sometimes it's a fine line, I think, between villainy and heroism, especially in movies.
But through this time, I was doing these things. I've been around. The trial didn't make me. I had a actual life. I was hosting for 4 years the Wizard World, which was the largest traveling Comic-Con. So I was traveling with the late Stan Lee. I was traveling cities for, I think we did 20 different cities a year. And I did this for 4 years. And it was the most fun of my life where you've got every actor that's in a Marvel movie, actors that are signing autographs from DC Comics. And then I had a stage, like an entertainment stage, where it was like America's Got Talent in that city where we have a booker that would go to Chicago, Philadelphia, and hire talent. And we ended if it went from 9 a.m. until 8 a.m. I'd work those. I'd rarely take a break. But the 7 to 8 hour, we did Kato Roki. Kato Roki was where we had other actors. The people would sign up that were dressed as Spider-Man, Aquaman, from Suicide Squad. What's the Margot Robbie role? I forgot.
Oh, Harley Quinn. Yeah.
Harley Quinn. But everyone would come up. It was the biggest thing, and it caught on after a year, and everybody waited to sign up for that. And then we start going to different countries. And I say this because that's where I just, got married somewhat recently, and that's where my wife is from China, who is incredible. And it's funny because in China at that time, we tell a story, we share that they were running that Ryan Murphy show, if you remember. The Ryan Murphy at won, I think, 9 Emmys or something. American Crime Story.
Yeah.
So our first date, she already saw that in China, but when I met her, she said, "Oh, there's a Kato in that." And then she's looking like, "Well, you don't look like the guy. Is that?" Well, I said, "No, that's me, an actor playing." And she was blown away. We laugh about that all the time. That's that our date. I go, "No, that's American Crime Story. I'm that Kato guy." And by the way, she's great. Nan,
yes, congratulations.
Yeah, funny. We talk about that a lot of how life is. Our cultures are different, but everything else is. She's teaching me. She eats very healthy. That's all. So I know it. I never knew what hot pot was until she said hot pot, and it's
Really?
like every night hot. Yeah, now I know. I never had a hot pot in my life till I met her. So,
Oh, hot pot's great.
yeah.
So I just want to be clear on that story because it's a really good story.
Yeah.
She didn't know, she had seen American Crime Story and connected your name with the guy from American Crime Story and said, and then
Exactly.
you're like, no, that is me.
She saw American Crime Story in Beijing.
Okay.
So, and then when she moved to America with a job, she brought that up, and I said, "No, I'm Kato, that guy in that thing," and I kind of laughed about it there.
That's really funny.
Yeah, find out what's the actor's name, William, because it's bugging me. I didn't know. He said just really kind things in some interview show that he never met me, but he said that that Kato was a good dude, so it made me feel better. I said, "I don't care if you made me look like Spicoli from Fast Times."
Billy Magnuson.
Billy Magnuson. I know William Billy close enough. Billy Magnuson, yeah. What a good actor, too. Great actor.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about that experience. I imagine you watched that show. Was that
Tim,
was
I'll
that
tell
too
you,
weird
I
for
not
you?
only
Yeah.
did I watch the show, the New York Daily News asked me to write an article on the first episode, so they gave me a screener. And I thought, boy, this is going to be so cathartic for me. I wrote this article. After I wrote it, it not only got in the New York Daily News, but printed in USA Today. And from that moment on, from writing, they asked me to do all 10 episodes. And I had a job as the writer for the New York Daily News, freelanced. And you can go online and read all of them. And I love doing it because it's such a release, because I saw how much was embellished. And by episode 3 I'm writing, there was too much Kato even for Kato, because they put me in stuff that I wasn't even involved with. And but then again, they made, at that time, they added the Kardashians a lot because they had, obviously billions of followers. But I said they weren't in that scene, or they weren't part of it. But it was great how they did it. They won all the Emmys, and I know Ryan Murphy knows how to make a docuseries,
Yeah.
or
yeah.
a crime story and a horror story and whatever else he does.
I feel like this is a good segue to the serious question that I wanted to ask you previously. When you watch that, they really do emphasize the defense's use of the racial tension. They use the racial tension in LA as a tool to basically say, if OJ Simpson, the crown jewel of African-American sports players, is convicted, the city's going to burn to the ground. Was that embellished at all? What was the scene like in LA during that time?
I think since the Rodney King episode happened with the Rodney King beating, very heated. I mean, I think the proof is in, after the verdict, how they had a split screen of white against black. And you saw that, how the celebration of African-American compared to, from what they showed on TV with the media, how the media controls everything, how the somber looking was on white American. So definitely it was race was completely involved, and the defense knew how to handle it. I mean, Johnny Cochran, the late Johnny Cochran, he knew how to work a jury. I mean, it's the dream team on the defense for a reason. They knew how to play to that jury that was there. I mean, the jury even waved to OJ during the trial. I was there when they actually waved. So it was sort of, you kind of knew where it was going, or I did. I said, I don't think they're going to convict this OJ Simpson.
Okay, so you did. Like, you saw that all kind of playing out.
Yeah. When I was 6.5 days on the stand, I saw that. And it was the first time ever in my life I was in a courtroom when I was called as a witness. So, better to be sworn in than sworn at, I guess. I really think, Tim and Lance, I have this part of our YouTube where people put in questions. And it's a 1 Degree of Scandalous to follow because, boy, true crime is really the number one genre on podcasts and shows and spin-offs with CSI. I mean, look on TV, everything is crime related. And I think it's crime related because I think people want to watch this stuff thinking that their life is, look, my life's better than this guy's. And I think that's it. It's sort of that Homer Simpson thing of people watching The Simpsons because they go, they look at Homer as real life like, oh, at least my life's a little better than Homer Simpson. Speaking of Simpsons. So that's the way I think the reason why true crime is huge. And, with our show, just like I said, it's just, we hope it grows and grows and grows. And I hope my show sells and other shows that I'm involved with right now. And, I just keep at it.
Yeah, totally. And there's another element of true crime that people process when they're trying to figure out the why in all of this. And I think what you're doing with your show and your experience and you're bringing all of this out is just letting people know that there's something deeper than what they just saw on the surface. And you're like a perfect example of that. There's something deeper going on. There's, attitudes and expectations that you have to adjust your life to when you've been dealt this hand, when you didn't mean for this to happen. And how do you go from there? And even when you said like your family, you use your family. I bet a lot of people out there right now are going through something and they're like, you know what? I never reached out to my family for this one thing. Maybe they can help. So the true crime thing is a number of reasons. And I think you encapsulate a lot of them. And, really can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing all of this.
It's completely true. Real quickly, I'll just wrap this up by saying, because I think it's really important. I won't mention name. I had a friend that's here in a rehab center and in LA, and I haven't seen the guy in a long time. And he had reached out to me and wrote a long letter on my direct messages saying, I've known you. You don't really drink. You don't do drugs. And your spirit is this thing. Can you help me? Would you visit me? And, they allow someone to come and see. So my wife and I went to see him. And I was like, I haven't seen this guy forever. Do I do it? And I'll tell you what, it changed his life. And I saw how people that are struggling and all that is to make the call to someone and that person that can help them out. It changed everything. I mean, it made me feel great, but trust me, it really helped this person out that it makes a difference. So that's something to go through if you can help someone that's in need and not blow them away and all that. If you have the ability to make something positive, I think you should do it 100%. It's life-changing for them to be a positive in their life. Like, hey, I'm going to make it through this thing. I'm not trying to get all maudlin on people. It's too sentimental, but it's really, really makes a difference. But watch my stuff. Please, Tim, Lance, have people follow me on Twitter. Twitter is the serious Kato at Kato_Kaelin. And I get really ugly, especially involving sports and other things. But Instagram is Fun Kato, where it's very uplifting. So it's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyder. It's Dr. Kato and Mr. Kaelin.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Kato. We really appreciate it.
You got it, guys. I appreciate it. And best to you. Thank you very much.